delete your accounts. Well, actually, more accurately, delete the data. That's what Tim Apple told Mark Facebook in a secret meeting right after the Cambridge Analytica scandal first broke, right after 80 million people using Facebook had their personal information stolen and weaponized for political advertising, after Cook was asked in an interview what he would do if Apple was ever in that situation.
What would I do? I wouldn't be in the situation. The truth is, we could make a ton of money if we monetized our customer, if our customer was our product. We've elected not to do that.
And after Zuckerberg, allow me to retort it in another interview.
You know, I find that argument that if you're not paying, that somehow we can't care about you to be extremely glib, right? And not at all aligned with the truth.
Zuckerberg met with Cook and asked him, face-to-face, CEO to CEO, how Cook would handle the fallout from Cambridge Analytica. And Cook, acidly by all descriptions, told Zuckerberg that Facebook should delete any and all data collected outside their own apps. And Zuckerberg was stunned, obviously ignored the advice, and would go on to tell an employee that Facebook needed to, quote-unquote, inflict pain on Apple. More pain than even the year before, when a political firm co-funded by Facebook and Qualcomm astroturfed false stories about Cook running for president to try and alienate him from the then hyper-volatile administration in Washington. But Apple just decided that if Facebook wouldn't delete our third-party data, Apple would let us delete their access to it, with iOS 14.5 and App Tracking Transparency, ATT. Facebook and others like them could still track what we were doing in their own apps, but if they wanted to keep tracking us across the web and into other apps as well, they had to ask our permission first. That's it. That's all. It rolled out 2 weeks ago, and since then, over 95% of American iPhone and iPad users and roughly 88% of global users are just hard noping out of third-party app tracking on the daily. And that's according to Verizon's Flurry Analytics, which, tracks over 5.3 million people across 1 million apps on the daily. And Facebook, well, they're losing their shit. Sponsored by Brilliant. Over 70% of you watching this video still haven't subscribed, so hit that button and bell and we'll build the best, most informed community in tech together. Now, it's critical to remember that app tracking transparency, it isn't a vibranium shield. It doesn't protect against everything. It only prevents apps from using Apple's unique device identifier for advertising to track us into other apps and across the web. For anything and everything else, Apple expects developers to respect and honor our choice, but can't really do anything outside App Store policy enforcement to actually guarantee that. So for companies like Facebook, which owns whole swaths of the internet, from the main Blue app and website to Instagram, Messenger, and WhatsApp, their first-party knowledge of us and our activities is already beyond stupefying. Factor in social plugins and it's damn near perfect. So perfect, people literally still think that they must be listening into us with our microphones. But they're so good at this, they don't even need that. They don't need technologies that would drain our batteries or be more easily detected. This way they can track us for longer, and it's way harder for us to conceptualize or even realize what's happening. For Google, which owns Chrome, the most popular web browser in the world, never mind Android, the most popular device platform on Earth, it isn't even a speed bump, which, total tangent shows just how much smarter or more nefarious Google has been than Facebook. Owning the interface and infrastructure makes it all but impossible to prevent tracking of one kind or another. And Google realized and executed on this from very, very early on. Meanwhile, Facebook flip-flopped on making phones, poached and purgatoried the best and brightest engineers in the industry over and over again, and finally only bet and hopped on Oculus, being the facehugger VR data parasite of the future, which may partially explain the difference in their relative threat responses. And I explained a ton about all of this and how it works in my 2 previous videos, one on Facebook, the other on Google, and I'll link to both of those in the description below. Now, yes, of course, Apple owns iOS, macOS, and Safari, and has perfect knowledge of our activities on their own platforms as well, which has led to Facebook and even some analysts calling foul, calling Apple hypocritical, that Apple is shutting Facebook and others out of third-party tracking while engaging in first-party tracking themselves. But that argument only works if you conflate first-party tracking with third-party tracking. And again, first-party tracking is what everybody does and everybody can still do, even under app tracking transparency. So that's just super disingenuous, but it's exactly the misinformation that Facebook has been spreading about this. And also, you have to ignore the huge differences in how and why the tracking is done. Namely that Facebook and others do it to build massive social graphs to feed even more massive networks and buy, rent, or sell our personal data or aggregations or viewpoints thereof. And no one can deny anymore that that's not exactly what happens, at least not sometimes, since Cambridge Analytica and the various brokerage deals were dragged out into the light. Where Apple, by contrast, is only ever using first-party tracking and only for App Store search and placement ads and for News Plus and stock ads, certainly not what anybody would call a robust or impressive ad business, and they're not building any social graphs or entering into any data brokerage deals either. Now, I do think that it's a huge problem and conflict of interest that Apple is even in the ad business at all. And sure, Steve Jobs tried iAds in the past, and that didn't work either, but it's just so strategically ill-advised for Apple to be stirring up so much attention about blocking Facebook and third-party tracking, while at the same time ramping up their own first-party advertising product efforts, never mind just colossal blunders in hiring and very rapid firing. There are just so many subtleties involved, and Apple has not been able to communicate, or maybe people just don't care about the complexities, the differences between first-party targeting and third-party tracking. So all that most people see, even some self-proclaimed experts, is just giant neon anti-competitive red flags intensifying. And you could make an argument that Apple leading by example with a privacy-first ad product could help change, could help redefine the industry, but you could also argue that just being in the ad business will always be a corrosive, a corrupting influence that flies in the face of decades of Steve Jobs and Tim Cook saying customers shouldn't be the products, and that there are businesses that Apple just should never, not ever be in. And luckily, Facebook isn't that smart either, because if they were, they could have started serving the absolute worst, most trash fire of remnant ads to coincide with app tracking transparency, and then, in the disclosure and consent dialogue, apologized for Apple forcing the bad experience on everyone and offering to premium and personalize it all up again if only we'll consent to that little ad tracking pop-up. Instead, they're hitting us with full screen takeovers that say if we don't agree, maybe Facebook and Instagram will no longer be free. You know, like nice friends and followings you have there. Be a real shame if anything were to happen to them. But we all know Facebook and Instagram aren't services that were ever built for our benefit. They're massive data harvesters that were built entirely for Facebook's benefit, that use the most enticing interfaces possible to game out as much data from us as possible. And they make so many billions and billions of dollars every quarter off our data that never mind leaving them free, a strong argument could be made, should be made, for them to actually be paying us for our data way beyond just a free, simple service, like cash money coin beyond. And Instagram and others have just announced new and more ways for creators and influencers to get paid on the Facebook platform. But why not everyone? Facebucks that you can spend in the new shopping tabs, they're just so content to keep pushing in front of us so always now. Whatever, like anything. Maybe that's the kind of relationship we should have with modern social networks. Forget scandals like Cambridge Analytica, Nova VPN, the algorithmic malfeasance, betraying WhatsApp and Oculus login promises, and the list that literally goes on and on and on and on. Respect our tracking choices, and if you want us in, pay us to get in. Start making more equitable relationships with us, and maybe in that way earn back some of our trust. And until they do, we've just got to keep educating ourselves so we can better understand how everything from ad tracking to algorithms actually work. And to get started, to get into this industry, to help create that better, brighter future for all of us, we have Brilliant, a website and app built on learning while doing and solving these kind of real-world challenges for all of us. Because Brilliant's got these interactive courses on algorithms, yeah, but also math and science and computer science, logic and deduction, physics, quantum mechanics, game theory, cryptocurrency, and so much more. Everything that we need for all the most attractive and important careers of the future, and all with instant feedback that coaches you bit by bit so you can rapidly improve and learn fundamental concepts, literally without sometimes even realizing it. And there's no memorizing long, messy formulas or fact sheets, no tests or grades, not any of that stuff that made school learning just so onerous. All you have to do is go to brilliant.org/Rene Ritchie or click the link in the description. Pick a course and get started now, today. That's brilliant.org/Rene Ritchie. And clicking on that link really helps out this channel. Hit the playlist above for more, much more on Apple and Facebook, even Apple and Epic, Apple in the App Store, just all the tea, all the drama. Hit that playlist and I'll see you in the next video.